And it is now 7:30. I see Hector is here, so looks like the select board is here, or at least coming in now.
Yes, we do have the select board here.
Okay. And so Valerie, I'm going to pass it over to you to facilitate.
Sure. Let me just pull up this presentation. All right. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Valerie Ortiz. I'm the planning director in Stowe, if we have not met. We're here tonight to talk about Lower Village. So this is the first thing that you see when you come into Stowe from Maynard, Lower Village. It's the gateway to Stowe. It sets the tone for our town. So right now it has large swaths of parking lots, big boxy buildings set back pretty far from the street. There's not very many trees out there. But what do we want it to be? What do we want it to look like? So that's why we're here tonight. We're at a pretty critical moment. There's a lot of vacancies in the district. There could be development coming in, but if it does, it's through the existing zoning. So the zoning changes that we're proposing introduce a new blueprint for the village, and it's all about design. So architecture, landscaping, the look and feel of the district. So how do you want to feel when you're there? So the zoning that we're proposing enables a walkable, vibrant village center. The purpose of the bylaw is to direct the long-term revitalization of Lower Village. So when we talk about long-term, the planning board means 10, 15 years out. We understand that there is not going to be an overnight change in the village. The bylaw also gives greater control to the planning board and Stowe residents over how Lower Village looks, how walkable it is, and what type of development is allowed. I'll just get 3 quick questions out of the way, just right off the bat. We've heard these through the different public forums that we've held and the feedback that we've gotten over the past few months. So what about water? So we know that water is a critical component to developing Lower Village. The point here is to get our zoning in place before water comes so that we can make sure that any development looks the way we want it to, that the architecture is sound, that the design of the village aligns with our vision. So right now, the Shaw's Plaza has water. On the south side of Great Road, those businesses are all on private wells, so they do have water concerns. But the bylaw doesn't mention water directly. We don't do water infrastructure through zoning. So again, that will come next. So how does the proposed zoning help businesses? Well, it allows further development of the sites, so it increases the number of tenant spaces. We're allowing new uses such as food trucks, pop-up markets, mixed use development at a small scale. So if you imagine first floor retail and second floor apartments. So that will bring foot traffic into the district, and it will also drive development in the parcels. Also, an aesthetically appealing district is going to draw businesses in. We've heard time and again from businesses and business property owners that it's the aesthetics, the feel of the district does currently deteriorate from folks' interest in locating in Stowe. So if you live in Lower Village, we're revitalizing your neighborhood. So this is your village. You'll be able to walk to a vibrant village center, and it will have a more cohesive feeling between businesses and residential developments. So here is a brief history of the Lower Village planning efforts. So this does not include previous work at bylaws for Lower Village. So really just focused on how we got to this exact bylaw that we're looking at. So we have done about a decade of public outreach, public forums, different committees looking at the look and feel of the district. We've worked over time with third-party consultants, technical experts to make sure that the bylaw is viable and that it reflects what we know that residents want. So the purpose here too is to look at this Lower Village Revitalization Committee final report. So this report synthesized everything that we've learned for those 8 or 9 years and really drove the vision of what is now in the bylaw. So that Lower Village Revitalization Report is how we got to this vision statement. So all of the zoning that we're working towards are intended to make this vision happen. So it's an attractive gateway to Stowe. It's a place where you can safely and conveniently live, work, shop, dine, recreate. It's a place for you to meet and connect with your neighbors. Businesses will thrive and it will be accessible for all users. And so all of that really comes down to what planners talk about when we say traditional village design. So what came out of those years of public outreach and effort was traditional village. So this is there are 5 distinct ways that we talk about this. So is the district walkable, both to the district and also within? Is there a strong mix of uses, having restaurants, services, retail components, and housing, right? So there are housing opportunities allowed here. We want the district to be accessible by car, bike, and by foot so that all modes of transport can get there conveniently. And also a distinct sense of place so that you know where you are when you're standing in Stowe. So if any of you have ever been to the development off Route 27 in Maynard Crossing, that kind of development looks like any town, right? You don't know that you're in Maynard. So what we want for our village is for it to look like Stowe so that it more cohesively blends in to the neighborhood around it and that you feel like this is your home, this is your village. So I'll go into each of these items a little bit more, but the reasoning that we're adopting new zoning is because of the car-centric district, the persistent vacancies, the unsatisfactory mix of businesses that we've heard from residents time and again. The district lacks a sense of place, and time is of the essence. We have to get the zoning in place before water comes to the district. Also before any future development comes in, right? If a 4-acre parcel in Lower Village turned over tomorrow, we want to be sure that we can guide the look and feel of that development. And this zoning is the way we can do that. So quickly, this is a snapshot of the Shaw's Plaza. Again, this is highly vehicle oriented. So this is all about the car. So there's high parking requirements, sparse landscaping, and you have buildings lining a parking lot. The solution here is to get a pedestrian oriented neighborhood with lower parking requirements, decentralized parking, so that you have these pockets of parking rather than a large swath, right? Lots of landscaping, sidewalks within the district, really focusing on accessibility so that you can access those storefronts from the sidewalks, you can access them from the parking lot in the back. Of course, we've all seen all of these signs. So the persistent vacancies, again, we know this is partly due to water. We understand that as a critical piece here. But also our current zoning has a lack of opportunities for anyone to redevelop or reconfigure their lots. And again, we know from business owners that aesthetics and the physical appearance of Lower Village is very important. The solution is allowing property owners more flexibility and a focus on aesthetics. So we're allowing new uses, including small scale mixed use development, flexible site planning, and it's all about the look and feel. The other problem is the current business mix, very heavy on office and service establishments, very few restaurants. There aren't many opportunities for you to gather with your friends, family, neighbors, hold a meeting, see people, meet and connect. So the solution is to put in more business options, add new allowed uses, include mixed use development to increase the vibrancy of the district, increase the foot traffic, and provide those community gathering spaces, including outdoor dining. All right, so lack of a sense of place. So this image is focused on Lower Common, but it really doesn't scream Stowe, right? You don't know that just around the corner is the Assabet River. You don't know that you're actually looking at a little bit towards the town forest, right? You could be just coming in from Shelburne Farm, grabbing an apple cider donut, but does this feel like Stowe? So the solution here is connection and design. Play in Stowe, stay and shop. This is the gateway to Stowe. The proposed zoning leads with design. It's very design forward. So rather than having strict dimensional requirements, we're going for architectural and design standards. We still have the special permit and site plan approval process so that the planning board has these guardrails to make sure that we can work with the applicant to produce the best development for the residents of Stowe and for the neighbors of that development. So we can place conditions of approval and really ensure that the developments coming in are aligned with our vision. So I'll end here before I pass this off to our consultant, Peter Flinker. But again, so this vision is all about walkability, a strong mix of uses, including housing, making sure it's accessible and it feels like Stowe. So I think Peter is in attendance at this point. If you,
Yes, I am.
yes, oh, wonderful. So if you want to quickly introduce yourself and just jump right into the images that you've provided. We've contracted with Dodson and Flinker. They are a top design, landscaping, planning firm, and they are helping us out here to better visualize what our bylaw will produce. So take it away, Peter.
Yeah, it's great to be back in Stowe, virtually or otherwise. And yeah, the immediate task was to sort of test the zoning and to see what it might be produced if we pretended we're a developer or landowner and sort of went through the rules and regulations that are part of the zoning and sort of say, well, if we take all these setbacks and we add them up, if we take the zoning and parking requirements and so on, what would we end up with? And could you actually do something as desired by, what you've been talking about for the lower village for many years. So I'm going to share my screen and start this slideshow. Everybody should be seeing this image, which is existing conditions. So this is you're all pretty familiar with the big plaza and the way it relates to the road. And this is the old sort of lower village common. And here is what it potentially could develop into with the proposed zoning. Several things to keep in mind. It's never going to develop exactly like this because all decisions are going to be made by the landowners, future developers, and the town as process of review. But this is sort of imagining what it could be like if you follow the sort of goals and objectives and all the standards that are part of the zoning. So the big idea is to try to, instead of on the left where you have this road corridor going through essentially a giant parking lot on both sides of the road, you flip it so the parking is behind the buildings. These brown structures are proposed new buildings. So the buildings come up to the road and the parking is flipped to the rear. One of the reasons that's possible is that we create a new sort of perpendicular road that's a new kind of a main street entering the site where one of the existing entrances is into the plaza, but we really turned that into kind of a side street. So you turn off the main road into this side street. There's on-street parking on both sides. There's tree-lined sidewalks. And again, you're enclosed by buildings and the parking is behind the building. So what you see is something that feels like a traditional village in Stowe rather than a parking lot in New Jersey. I can say that because I'm from New Jersey and it's a great state, but they do have a lot of parking lots. This isn't going to happen all at once, right? So part of this is thinking about how can we sort of fit these standards into the process as development is occurring or as redevelopment is occurring. So again, here is sort of looking at the existing conditions on the site. It could happen just with one project at the beginning. So maybe taking down that one part of the plaza that's sort of next to the old common, leaving the supermarket and the other businesses, but replacing that old part of the plaza, again, new buildings up against our new entrance street, parking in the rear. And then you can immediately see, hopefully, that if you're standing on the common, what you're seeing is instead of the side of this old strip mall and the parking lot, you'd be looking at what hopefully is an attractive new building with gables. This could be 2 to 3 stories. And it's surrounded by pedestrian space, which is sort of indicated by this pink crosshatch. So pretty much all the parking is in the rear. And then when you're next to the building, you're entirely within this pedestrian zone, which is attractive. All the buildings are sort of opening up onto the sidewalks on either side of the building. They're lined with trees to make it comfortable and attractive and so on. So just this sort of puts the plan in place that then could continue with maybe a phase 2, sort of filling in the other part along the street frontage, building another building on the other side of our new main street, but keeping the supermarket and their parking. And so that could remain, keep functioning forever. There's a lot of these kind of developments that do incorporate a supermarket, or eventually it could be redeveloped as more mixed use buildings with, again, parking behind them. So these buildings could, under the zoning, they could be up to 3 stories tall, but they're really looking for what we think of as a 2.5-story building with a 3rd story sort of tucked under the roof. And that could be either, probably retail on the ground floor, offices, or apartments above them. And that could be on both replacing the plaza area, but also filling in on the south side of the street. So keeping some of the existing buildings, which are shown in gray. But as you see here, by consolidating the access points and linking the parking lots in the rear of the buildings, which again is a key part of the proposed bylaw, you can free up space along the street because everybody doesn't have to have their own driveway. And instead of that, you can replace those with new buildings. You can fill in on either side of an older building. You can expand an existing building. And you see how that the entrance to that south side is consolidated to fit across the street from the main entrance to the new plaza. So it's basically taking this whole area and thinking about how can we redevelop it as if we were a master developer developing it all from scratch. And the good news is we don't have to tear down all the existing buildings or make anybody leave necessarily. We can work around the existing businesses and hopefully create an environment that's better for them and better for new businesses as time goes along. How'd I do, Valerie? Is that enough?
Yes, that was fantastic. Thank you. So that is really the end of our presentation at this point. I don't know if the board has questions for Peter. If there's any comment, anyone want to look a little bit closer at those plans that Peter was showing.
Representing the owner of the plaza, I'd love to provide some feedback if that's okay.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Well, I guess the first thing is I don't remember being consulted on this plan. And given that we are, I think, the largest area in the picture that you showed, I think it might be useful before you proceed to check in with me on the plan that you're contemplating.
So one thing I want you to realize is that's not a plan. That was just a concept for us to understand what our bylaw would allow. So that's not a proposal that anyone's putting forward. We more wanted to know from the bylaw what could actually be done. Because right now we couldn't put buildings near the street, etc. So that was more a conceptualization of the bylaw.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. I just think that it might be useful if, given that we do have, I think, the largest taxpayer in Stowe, and given that we comprise the largest portion of that area that you showed, that even in concept, it might make sense to check in with us. I'm just making an invitation that I think would be useful for everybody. That would be my first comment. My second comment is, unfortunately, for the vision that was shown, there is an existing building. So I think that when you start from scratch, I wish that in many of our sites, I should start by saying that we own 89 shopping centers in 3 states, and that I'm the CEO of Linear, and I've been, for those who don't know me, Joel Cadis, and I've been doing this for over 30 years. So I've touched a few retail centers, and I wish that many of my centers I could start from scratch. But the reality is that there is a shopping center in place with an investment in place. And so decisions have to financially make sense for change to occur, would be my next comment. Another challenge with this plan is that many of the tenants and the center have restrictions on sightlines and blocking their sightlines. So that's another challenge that this plan, like Shaw's would be very, very unhappy with this plan from a sightline. These are just realities that we need to deal with, right? So, and if Shaw's stopped operating, probably the majority of the tenants in the center would stop operating. That's just a reality. I mean, that's the fundamentals or ABCs of a center that's anchored by a supermarket. So any change to the center is going to have to be good for Shaw's, or else you have a whole scale change to the center. And sightlines and parking in that order are incredibly important. So I don't really know where to begin to talk about all the reasons why this plan would be very upsetting to most of the retailers in the center. And then the next point I would make is that the problem with Stowe, as I've mentioned in other meetings, is Stowe is a beautiful town that I've enjoyed biking through and golfing and picking apples, and it's a beautiful, beautiful town. I mean that. I've been a lifelong resident of Massachusetts, and I've had so many happy times there. The problem with Stowe is there aren't a lot of people relative to other towns. So the 3-mile radius around Stowe is about 18,000 people. Most centers require a minimum of 20 to even function. And the majority of that 18,000 are in Maynard. And so a lot of those people in Maynard now are shopping at the Market Basket in Maynard. So the challenges that this development has that would be worsened from a retail perspective are significant. So that's why I'm saying I think communication and dialogue would be really helpful, so that we can inject some perhaps a slightly more realistic perspective on what can be done with the existing center. I think that, all kidding aside, I mean, I think if the town wanted to take the center and scrape it, you know, just completely remove it and start from scratch, I think it's a lovely plan. I don't know that it would work with the number of people in Stowe. And Maynard it works because there's more people, but absent that, we have a reality to deal with the existing center. So I could go on, and I don't want to dominate the conversation tonight, but I think it's really, really important that everybody have a realistic and informed frame on the challenges the center faces and how these plans would materially negatively impact the center. I mean, my approach is to try to be direct and transparent, and I'm trying very, very hard to communicate now. So I just would urge everyone on this call to really think through the impact from a real estate lens on really the only and dominant center for the entire, the entire town. So that was my feedback.
Karen? You're on mute, Karen.
I just want to point out that this bylaw is not aimed at forcing any property to redevelop their property. You have every right to keep your property as it is now. It's not forcing you to make any changes. It's just in the event that you or any of the other properties in the lower village did have an idea to redevelop. Say you sold it and somebody wanted to tear it down, fine. But we're not saying you have to do that.
No, I appreciate that.
That is not our aim.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate
It's more of
that.
a vision on what could be done with any of the properties.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, and I appreciate you saying that. we have a item on in the May agenda that I think that, we feel is a material solution, part solution that I think is completely in conflict with this vision. So part of the energy in my voice is perhaps around that goal as well. But we need to work together to win. I think that we all agree that we want a center that's going to be vibrant. And I think that we have to align our interest and work together so that Stowe has a healthy, dominant center in its community. And I think that's where all of my energy is.
I do have just a few comments in response. I do appreciate hearing more from you at this point. But I think it is true that we have reached out over the years, right? I mean, it has been a decade in the making. So we have kept some communication going about what the intent is, because certainly this has been the planning board's goal for quite some time. And I should also just reiterate that we have called on economic development experts to give us recommendations that are better suited for Stowe. So understanding exactly what our market range is and what types of uses could thrive in a town like Stowe. We definitely understand that we are not downtown Concord, right? We don't have that population in close range, but we have vetted the recommendations and the bylaw through folks who do know, more than I do about economic development. So really, this is to guide the long-term vision. So understanding that out, a decade or more into the future, there could be these changes that come.
All right. I guess, Peter, is there anything else you wanted to share based on the discussion?
No, I mean, as I tried to say earlier, none of this forces anybody to do anything. We hope that it's opening up attractive opportunities that the different landowners don't have now. But there is kind of a carrot and stick. I mean, we're asking for a higher level of attention to design. It doesn't necessarily mean more expensive buildings, but it does mean sort of thinking about it a little bit more carefully than a typical strip mall might do. And I think it's great to see representative of the owners here tonight to sort of.
All right, I'm going to try to get a few comments in, and then I would say, realizing that we're up against the schedule tonight, anybody else who wants to make a comment, please feel free to send comments to the planning office. We're hoping to get that. But Linda, do you want to make a statement?
Hector actually had his hand up first.
I'm going to him next. We'll
okay,
get you
all
both
right.
in.
I want to say that I really appreciate all the work that you've put into this presentation, Valerie, and the planning board for this look on the zoning. I have lived here a long time. I've seen different owners at the Stowe Plaza. I have seen some of the improvements, but we've been talking about improvements to Lower Village for at least 30, 35 years, maybe even longer. And some of this is the beautification and to get it to look better and at least getting something in place. So when the next owner or the next business wants to change, we have something in place. I don't think that, I respect the previous speaker's comments about, that's not their vision and some of the other things. I understand this, but whoever owns that property has the flexibility, if this bylaw is in place, to do some of these better changes. I'm not sure, the way it is now, existing bylaw, we can't do these improvements. And I would like to see some beautification. I intend to be here for several more generations, and or my family anyway, and I hope we have improvements. And so I really do like this concept, and the changes in the bylaw will help make improvements for all of us. Thank you.
All right, Hector.
Thanks. Thanks again for all this information, and it's been wonderful. I'm going to ask a question that first, for full disclosure, I live at Meeting House Lane, and I'm also a member of the select board. There was a great presentation that was done by Valerie and a few members of the planning board at Meeting House. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend. Questions keep coming up as to why the business district is expanding to include Meeting House. I've tried to explain that it's not a change in size. Meeting House is currently in the business district. It's a change in the concept of the business district. But I just wanted to have it put on record that this isn't a change in the size.
Thank you, Hector. I appreciate that. I know it can be confusing for some folks who haven't been familiar with the definition of the land. So thanks for putting that out there. With that, I know it is 8 o'clock, so we do have to move on to our public hearing. I want to thank everyone for coming. And again, we do welcome your comments. So even though we may not have been able to get them in public here at the meeting, please feel free to email the planning board or the planning office, and we'll make sure that those comments are considered.